Hello and welcome to Recharge and Rise. I am Emma Draycott, your founder and host for this experience, and I am an anxiety and burnout freedom therapist. And I'm really excited to have a conversation with Gail today. She is an intuitive and inner child healing coach, and I'm really excited to get more into that topic. So, Gail herself has gone through lots of different experiences and difficulties, and it hasn't always been easy, and now she wants to support you to make it easier. That is why she does what she does. So thank you, Gail, for being here.
You're so welcome. I'm happy to be here
Oh,
and
thank you.
have this amazing conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what led you to be doing the work that you do now.
Sure. So I would say I've always been a sensitive person. I've always been able to pick up on things in other people. And actually my like understanding of the inner child came through helping others. It was kind of like, they sometimes say that your purpose, your thing is like the thing that's like the nose on your face. And I didn't see it. I was just doing it. It was something that I think I'd always had as an ability, but I didn't realize it was my thing, you know? And it wasn't until I was in a particularly turbulent relationship, let's say, put that in a sort of nice way, that I actually could see the inner child of my partner at that time. And this inner child was kind of locked away in a box. It didn't get touched. There was some kind of like other energy that was very dominant that would never let that inner child be touched and loved and met. And yeah, I started to really recognize that in him, and I started to recognize it in others, and it became like an everyday thing. It was just there all the time. Little did I know that obviously this also reflected my own inner child, because I did tend to be a person who was trying to help other people. I'd done that since the age of 5. That was even on my report card in primary 1 at school, that I went around trying to help the other people in the class. So yeah, it's kind of born of a wound, but it's also given me purpose. Maybe we'll get into that as we go through. But that's kind of where that started. And then when I started my coaching practice, I didn't actually realize really that it would be the inner child that was my thing. It just kept coming up over and over and over again. So I decided to trust life, and I've let that kind of lead me, you know.
Really beautiful. Thank you for sharing those
You're so
experiences,
welcome.
and also how powerful it was that purpose like revealed itself even in those challenging
Yes.
situations, and that you've allowed yourself to be led and trust that that's the way. And I think with our life's purpose, I think that people might believe that or think that it just like is a massive sign
A
that you
fairy
can
tale.
see and that you absolutely know what you're here for. But it doesn't always happen like, well, often doesn't happen like that. But it's that trusting, that feeling that there's a bit of knowing, and actually you nurture that, and then you're like, it then gets stronger, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You've highlighted two things that I think are really important. One is the word revealed. I called my business Your Soul Revealed, because I believe that that's actually what we're doing. We're not trying to fix ourselves. You're not broken, right? You don't trust yourself yet, because there's probably areas of life that you're not particularly trustworthy, and that's every single person. We all have something that we're here to learn, as humans. Um, what was the other thing? Yeah, the hardship, right? I have so many people come to me and say, "Oh, but now I know this, and now I've learned this, and now I'm more conscious. Shouldn't life be a certain way?" And it doesn't work like that. I often like to say to people, like, we're kind of, onion layers. We're always peeling another layer, and then we're kind of moving in a cycle. We kind of retrace the steps, but hopefully we have more awareness of what we learned the last time. you know and on top of that, one of my sayings, I have lots of sayings that I'll probably drop in as we go, but one of my sayings is, your purpose is often in your pain, not in your passion. And that's because of this thing that people are seeking. I believe everyone's seeking. We tend to do it through, like, maybe we go and seek food, or we seek unhealthy things like alcohol and cigarettes and drugs and whatever. And then there are people that are seeking purpose and seeking love and connection and all of that. But the thing is, it's like, if we were to really, really dive deeper into ourselves, meet our inner child, learn to respect that, because I think a lot of people don't, right? Then you get access to something more that's inside of you that shows you more purpose, but it often starts with that seed of pain.
Mm.
And I would like people to think about their pain and try and sort of, flip it, and just ask themselves, how much did I learn from that event? Did it give me some kind of purpose? Compared to the other times in life when everything's sweet and we like that, and you need to have that, you need to have the times when you're having fun and you're out, like, you were saying about your husband, you're out with your husband, you're having great times. But during that time, we're not often learning anywhere near at the same level, So there's purpose in that. Even if you don't know what your purpose is, there's still purpose in your pain.
Yeah,
Kind of thing.
yeah. And I really resonate with that,
Mm,
definitely in the times of pain, like actually it's revealing. And also when I'm working with clients, there's often lessons in really
mhm.
difficult experiences, even if they don't yet know
Right,
that
right,
learning
right,
or that lesson. And really interesting what you were saying about the learning of that as well, that I see that these situations present themselves. If
mm,
that lesson hasn't learned, it's almost like, okay, this
right,
situation came, there was a lesson and a learning in that, but actually you didn't quite learn it. So
mm,
some months later or later down the line, you're going to have another opportunity to learn the
right,
same lesson. And
right,
I do believe that, and I see these patterns in my clients as well, that situations could keep on coming back if
right,
they
right.
don't listen to that piece.
And even just to add a little bit of more
Yeah.
compassion to that, um, I also think that we go through an experience and we learn maybe the first piece that we have to learn, right? And then we go around the cycle, and then there's the second piece that we have to learn,
Mm.
right? Because I do think there is this thing where people, oh, I haven't learned it. I've done this to myself so many times.
Mm.
Oh, I should know better. Oh, I
Mm.
haven't learned it. Oh, I shouldn't have picked that person. My thing
Mm.
is definitely within relationships, right? So I shouldn't have picked that person, right? I should have seen how they were. I should have known. But that actually isn't helpful, because I learned another piece.
Mm.
So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I don't want to keep repeating that. You don't have to keep repeating the cycle through pain, right? But yeah, I just wanted to add that in, because I think that sometimes we can beat ourselves up, and
Mm.
actually it's just the next piece. It's
Yeah.
the next layer.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. Thank you very
Yeah,
much for adding that.
yeah, that's
Yeah, so
okay.
actually we get each time or each situation,
Right.
we get to learn additional, and there is growth in all of those
Yeah,
pieces. And I love
absolutely.
that reminder to be compassionate to yourself, because it's not your, like, it's you're not to blame for that. Um, and there's definitely lots of situations I'm sure we've both experienced where
Mm,
there's been layers where we've come up with similar situations and we're learning.
right.
So, could you tell me a little bit where you've talked about inner child? What does that actually mean? So, what does the concept of inner child actually mean?
Yeah, a great question, because some people might be like, what do you mean? Like, I've got this
Yeah,
small thing somewhere inside of me.
inside.
And yes, you kind of have. Like, to me, it's, there's so much to do with this, but basically, the foundation of my work is that the inner child is the part of you that has been wounded in early childhood. But I would say, some might disagree, but I would say really from the age of like 0 to like mother's womb, you are part of her. You're picking up on whatever's going on for her, all the way maybe up until about the age of 12, right? by which time your like ego, right, starts to kick in to naturally separate you from parent, right? It's a natural process that everyone's supposed to go through, so you learn who you are independently of them, right? But basically during that time, and especially in the early years, you're you've kind of been born into a world of like certain family conditioning, right? Societal conditioning. You'll be told different things. You've got to deal with like the ego of your family. And what I mean by that is any of the kind of archetypal structures, you know, like men are like this or women are like this, or uh, in order to make money, you have to do this or be this, you know, in order to be loved, which we all have, you have to be a certain type of person. So all these conditions are put on. So your little inner child has to kind of compete now. So what I see it is like there's the first self, which is unconditioned, which is beautiful as it is, has all the gifts and talents that you're here to, you know, learn, not learn, bring out and explore within yourself. And then there's another version of you that has kind of been adapted to the environment, to the family system in order to belong, right? We often talk about abandonment wounds. Well, I see it as yes, there is that, but the core wound underneath that is belonging.
Mm.
I don't belong, or I'm afraid I don't belong. So we conform, right? So your inner child is the sad part of you, or the neglected part of you, however you want to see it, or the angry part of you, maybe, that, you know, has learned to adapt. And so you're not split. You're not really aligned. You're not really oneself anymore. And so that's where it starts. And then I believe we go through life and we split again and we split again, because we're always trying to find out how to belong, who's going to accept us for who we really are. And little do we know that we don't know who we really are, you know, which is why I do the work I do.
Yeah, okay. That's really, really interesting. So we have then different, I would call them different parts
Yes. Yeah,
of us that are potentially adapted to help us to have that belonging, that connection, our and probably meet our basic needs in life.
absolutely.
So, how and in that we can lose ourself.
Hmm.
How do you guide people back to their, I would call it home?
So one of the first things I do is I actually get people to do a meditation, which I'll give you the link at the end. It's free.
Amazing.
So I have an inner child meditation that's about 20 minutes long, and I encourage people to go and visualize as best they can, because not everybody is great at visualizing. So if you're a person that isn't, don't worry, just feel and listen as best you can to whatever's happening. It is guided, so you don't have to be thinking, oh, I need to make something up. And even if you do feel like you're making something up, just roll with it. Because what I tend to find is that the subconscious will show you yourself. It's just that we've forgotten how to read that, right? We don't really trust it. That's the other thing. We trust what we see. We trust, you know, whatever's happening here when we wake up, you know, and get on with our day. We trust whether someone is horrible to us or whether there's a nice experience, or we trust that as in the reality of that. But we don't tend to trust what goes on inside of us, right? Including the dream world and the subconscious. We're not really connected to that. So I like to take people there, get them to do that so that there's a connection. So I'm going to try and explain this in a less woo-woo way. Sometimes my language might be a bit woo-woo. But what I like to say is, when you connect to your subconscious, if you imagine it's the back of your head, right? It's not really, but if you imagine it's like the back of your head and you're pulling this information out from the subconscious, and then you put it onto paper. So when you do the meditation, then you pull all of that out, right? You have the experience, you pull it out, you put it onto paper, and then you read it back. Because when you read it back, now you're sending all of that information back. It's almost like you're having a conversation with your subconscious, right? And what then happens, interestingly, is the subconscious then sends you more, because now you've met that part of you, right? So you've met that part of you, that little inner child that's within you, and it will tell you things. And if it doesn't speak straight away, it will show you things, right? So it's that, it's you accessing the subconscious mind. It's you getting there. Now, I also want to say that that might sound very scary, but I want to encourage people to face yourself. The thing you're afraid of most is you. And the way to get into alignment is to become less afraid of you. Because when you trust yourself, you become less afraid of the world. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. There's a
Yeah.
different sense of safety and feeling, isn't there, when you trust
Absolutely.
yourself? And thank you
Yeah.
so much as well for sharing around the visualization because, doing what I do as well, not everybody can see it, but we
Mm-hmm.
can visualize. And I know we use that word, but yes, some people can see, but it can be any of your other senses as well. So it can be just
Absolutely.
a knowing, a feeling, can't
Mm-hmm.
it? So I know, you everyone can have an
Mm.
experience. It's just it might not be visual compared to people
Right.
that do see very visual.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's funny, like watching my clients go through it. I've got so many stories I could say, but one of the things I think of is I remember someone telling me once, oh, it doesn't work for me. Nothing happens. No, she was actually falling asleep. So when you do it, sit up, don't lie down. And like you said, like trust whatever comes, whether it's a feeling in the body. I had a
Yeah,
client of mine who his inner child sent him messages through. He said it felt like an energy that he could move around the body. I've never heard that again, but that was his. So
yeah,
you trust that. That's the key.
yeah,
It's different for everyone.
yeah. And whatever comes up for you is right for you, isn't it?
Right, right.
So in terms of once you've done that and met
Mm.
your inner self,
Yeah.
what are some of the strategies that you support people through to, what's then needed? I don't want to say the words, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah. That's all right. I quite like the word need. I had a client of mine who said he really didn't like it. He didn't like when I used it. But interestingly, he was a person who felt like he didn't need, which to me is like shows the inner child in itself or the block to that. So I do believe that people need support. I think it's important that you do work, on yourself, but I also believe that we kind of need support and we need community in order to do a lot of this work. Because the thing is like I call it the ego protection system, right? That's going to be activated a lot of the time when you're going to meet something painful or when you're going to meet something that actually isn't you. I'll explain that in a little moment. you know, you kind of need someone else to say, oh, have you seen that? Or have you thought about this way? Or, even actually just to be the space in the room. Sometimes I feel like I'm the space in the room and I'm just like an invitation to that person's inner child to say, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I love you exactly as you are. So you can unveil yourself to me. And I'm not judging you. I'm not telling you what to do. Right. I'm just the space for you, kind of like a conduit. Right. So I believe we need that. And then there is also like you have to have the willingness to go where you maybe don't want to go, because you are going to meet things that I'm not saying terrifying things. It's not that. For some people, maybe for most of us, it's just things that are uncomfortable, you know. But I would say the next thing that I tend to do is I take people more into the mind. So the first thing is connecting to the body because I believe the inner child resides in the body. I don't believe it's in your mind. But the mind is the place that's usually a big block to the meeting of the inner child in the body. So then we usually go into looking at the family karma, I call it. It's the conditioning of the family. And what we do is we look at your mum and dad. It can be other caregivers or maybe even older siblings or teachers and things like that. We look at that and we say, what have we taken on from our family? And was that ever really you? Like, let's say you're told that you are a loud, child and you're too much. Okay, but maybe your parents were actually extremely quiet and they were emotionally unavailable and they never expressed. So maybe you were the catalyst to become the expression for your family, and you're meant to be that because they've squashed themselves for like the last 5 generations, right? So we look at that and we go, did you decide that you were too much, and did you squash yourself and become quiet when actually you're not that because you were told to be that? That was what a good girl was, or a good guy was, or whatever, right? A good boy. So that's what we do. We look at the programming. So I'm very much about both worlds of going into the subconscious, connecting to the body, listening to the body wisdom. And now, okay, we've done that. We have a connection. Hopefully your inner child wants to come out and play with you, wants to meet you. But now we have to deal with the big guy who's in front of that, the protector, and we have to meet him.
Yeah.
Don't know whether I explained, but
Yeah, no, it's
enough.
like that next layer.
Yes.
From the inner child, so just kind of going back a layer, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
what do you find a common, and we'll use the word needs, like what
Mm.
do you find are the common needs of the inner child?
Actually, what I said to you, which is, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I love you exactly as you are. And I added in, I'm listening. And I get my clients to say this to themselves, but often I find if I say it to a client, that their inner child suddenly is there. They literally become the inner child, because that's what we're all waiting for. That's what everybody wants. They want someone to look at them and say, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I love you exactly as you are, and I'm listening. It's the most present person. And unfortunately, for most of us, our parents weren't able to be present. I mean, back then, right? If you look at your parents, they're not doing inner work, right? Most probably, from most people. And then our inner child kind of goes through life doing that. That wound kind of, I want to say it doesn't stop. It's just, but I would say it's more like it's a question, right? When there's something that triggers the nervous system, right? You get that trigger, then that question is there. Am I acceptable? Am I lovable? Am I going to be abandoned? Do I belong? There's those questions. Now, the mistake that's made is that we look out into the world and we say, oh, where is the person that's going to do that, or people that are going to do that? Now, some of that is valid. We do still need community. You do need the right people. But the main person you need is you. And if you haven't checked if you're doing that, then that's probably where the issue is. So I get my clients to say that to themselves also, because you have to become a safe parent for you.
You want to repeat those words? I think that'd be
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. So I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I love you exactly as you are. And I'm listening. And most times when that's said, people start to cry.
Mm.
They have the urge to, because it's the deepest truth, right?
Yeah.
And it hits home because it's actually what we all are. We're all lovable exactly as we are. Right? It's just that the protection system of the world, the ego of the world, hasn't allowed us to remember that. We live in a time right now where we're really being called to remember that. And you can see almost the complete opposite, can't you? If you look at the planet, sometimes I look and go, are we really in 2024 when there's such polarizing things happening? I use ego a lot. So we, the ego of the world, the kind of disconnected entity, right, of the world, is disconnected from the love, the love of others and the love of self. So this is what we need. It's very simple, but it can be very effective if you just sit with it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And then I'm wondering of two ways to go. So either
Mm.
talking about reparenting of the inner child, or talking a little bit more about the protection system and what
Okay.
goes on there. So it's an invitation. What would you like?
Okay. Well, what we can do is they kind of come together, so we can use both. So I have a premise called the trine of the wounded psyche, right? So if you imagine a triangle, right, you could draw this actually if anybody has, paper and pen.
Yeah.
You have a triangle. Let's say you have the inner child on the bottom left, right? So you write inner child, or you can draw your inner child if you're creative, right? And then at the top, we have the ego, right? Or how I like to call it, the ego protection system, because it literally is your protector, right? Now, this part of you is kind of, to me, it's almost like Sully, from the movie. I've forgotten the name of the movie for some reason.
What is it?
Uh,
Monsters Inc.
Monsters Inc. Yes, right. So if you remember the scene in the movie where he's rushing about, he's trying to find the little girl, and she's just going about doing her thing, right? And he finds her, he sees her in the room where they have like that kind of robotic child that's supposed to sit up in the bed and scream, right? Where they're practicing being a monster. And because he's trying to not like give away the fact that this child is in the room, he just plays the part and he roars, right? Before this, she's thinking he's all cuddly and cute. And then all of a sudden, he's absolutely terrifying, right? I kind of see your ego protection system as that character, right? He is trying to protect you, but sometimes he goes a bit overboard just doing his job. And, your inner child becomes more scared. He becomes more like a jailer, right? Rather than your protector. So there's that. So your ego is actually the part of self that's supposed to drive you through life, right? We need our ego. He's supposed to take you by the hand and say, this is how we're going to grow. This is what we're going to do. Like, oh, you want to do that? Oh, you have like an interest? Oh, you want to go create something? Okay, I'm going to take your hand. I'm going to figure out how we're going to manifest that here, right? We're actually going to, take your idea and make it something, right? Like anyone who's ever created anything, the phone or the plane or television, whatever it is, a computer, right? He's supposed to do that, but he's not in that role most of the time because he had to become your protector when you were little, right? So the ego gets a bad rep a lot of the time. I think there's a lot of talk about we need to get rid of it, it's scary, whatever. No, he's just in the wrong job. He's doing the job that you're meant to be doing as an adult, which is becoming the safe and loving inner parent, right? So if you then took a look at your triangle on the right side, all right, the one place that's left, that's actually where your loving inner parent should be. But in my world, what I see is that actually it's an inner critic who's there.
Mm.
It's the parent, right? And I'm not blaming our parents, by the way, or our caregivers, right? It's the way we're designed as humans. We tend to latch on to the negatives and kind of carry them like bags with us, right? But it's usually the voices of like the parents or the caregivers or from the family line that are sitting there. Oh, you can't do that, or you're not able to do that, or we don't do that, or it's all of that. So the ego is there to protect you from yourself, right? It's that inner critic. It's the voice that says horrible things to you when you look in the mirror, or says that a person doesn't really love you, they don't care. That's the voice that's the problem.
Mm.
So if you imagine that, it's not even like we're trying to eradicate that piece. It's just that if you come in as that loving inner parent, using all the phrases that I just said, even if you just did that every single day, at least once a day, you would notice that another voice starts to come in. So when someone says something to you, let's say your boss is really grumpy and they're like, oh, whatever, and dismiss you, right? Instead of the voice inside of you saying, oh my God, they hate me, I'm so crap at my job, you might hopefully end up with a voice of, do you know what? He's probably having a really bad day. Him and his missus aren't getting on. That hopefully will come first. That's what we want. So my job really is to help support that space.
Mm.
right? And then your ego, your lovely little fuzzy Sully, he can take a break, he can go on holiday, and then he can actually step into the role of, like, leading you with what actually wants to come through, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that I really love that demonstrate, and I'm visual, so that's a
Yeah.
really good way of explaining it and how it might be now, what your triangle might look like now, but
Mm.
actually what you support people to get to. And in terms of
Mm.
parenting self, then, so you've obviously got those statements that are really, really
Yeah.
powerful. Are there other ways that people can start to parent their inner child?
Yeah. So try to think back. So again, the first thing is the meeting of the self,
Yeah.
right? You have to be willing to meet yourself. You have to be willing to relinquish judgment of yourself. This can be hard,
Yeah.
right? Um, so one of the other ways you can look at is, what do you judge in others? Because you're probably judging that in yourself,
Mm,
right? That's quite a simple way. Not a
mm,
very comfortable way sometimes, but often that's how it is,
mm,
So releasing judgment, like stepping back. Um, One of the things that I've actually been doing with my Align tribe, I've got like a membership where, we kind of continue the work. We've been talking about stepping back, kind of not away from your body and like removing yourself from yourself, but like really stepping back and questioning. So I like this concept of asking a conscious question. Instead of asking yourself something like, oh, why does this always happen to me? Because we know who's going to answer that. Not the right parent, Asking a conscious question. It could be the same question, but just asked consciously. It could be, why is this happening to me? Why does this happen to me? Curiosity. Curiosity instead of judgment.
mm.
Creating more space, stepping back, and kind of viewing yourself almost like you're an avatar on the planet. What is your pattern? Look at that, you know? Like we were talking before about the cycles, right? What is your usual pattern? How do you normally respond? Can you catch the next lesson number 3 or 4 or 5? Can you see what that is, right? I don't even like using lessons, actually. I like learnings.
Learnings, yeah.
Yeah. So that, I mean, really, I could go on and on. There's lots of different things that you can do, and as we said before we started recording, you know there are going to be different things that resonate with different people, you
Mm,
know but absolutely, the first thing to me is always that first connection with the inner child is very important. And
mm,
then releasing judgment, becoming more curious, looking at the conditioning, because that will help you to see that maybe you're not actually really being your true self, you know and then creating that loving inner parent voice. It's cultivated. It's not a voice that will just suddenly appear. The voice that will suddenly appear is
mm.
usually the inner critic, because you've practiced that over and over and over. You've done it so often. You're very good at it. So, like going to the gym or anything else that you really want to learn, say you want to be an artist, you have to practice,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and that then voice does
Hmm.
become more natural, doesn't
Yeah.
it? So it's like you are literally training that, and in your words, that parent, and it's, that compassionate parent, so
Yeah.
that you can, your inner child's needs can be met and seen and heard and validated. And it makes a really big difference. So
Mm.
I'd love for you to share, a story eh, of the impact that this work has in a
Okay.
confidential way, which feels
Sure,
right
sure,
for
sure.
you, of actually what can happen when you
Yeah.
start doing this type of work.
Okay. I'm trying to think of I can think of a couple of people. So yeah, without mentioning names or backgrounds or anything. So I had a client of mine who was very locked in her belief systems, let's say. So a lot of her dynamic was that she was very angry. She was very angry in relationships and very angry at work. and couldn't figure out why she was so angry, right? It wasn't obvious to her. She spent a long time in that situation. And I think, a lot of us get that way when we can't see something in ourselves, we become kind of desperate, you know. That's when we realize we need support. Right. So she wasn't happy in her job. She still wasn't really over that last relationship that she'd been through. And so when we started working together, what was really interesting was that her inner child actually was there. Like, meaning, there's something I haven't mentioned. There's also a part of us I call the wonder child, right? The wonder child is the first self that's unconditioned. It just loves. It's just joy. It's just full of wonder, right? So what was interesting to me is that actually she had that. She still had that wonder. She still had that connection. Like, she loved the sun, she loved colors, all of those things. But there was this very grumpy part of self that was very judgmental and knew the path that she had to take. Now, what it turned out to be was that actually that wasn't her. That was something that was in her family line. It took us a while to get there for her to see it.
Mm.
She had been told that, the most important thing to do was to go to university. So she'd convinced herself that that's what she wanted to do. But everything from her body said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I want to actually go and become a healer, right? That other character had no interest in becoming a healer. It was all about, I'm going to be the first person in my family to go to university and to get this degree. That actually wasn't what she was called to do.
Mm.
So the amazing thing is that during her time of working with me, even though she was scared, as she went along, through the weeks of working with me, she came to that conclusion. She actually quit her job. She started on her journey in the healing arts, and now she's doing that full time. And she's also now in an amazing relationship. Like, she's met the love of her life, right? So that's just one example. And then another of my clients that I share the story a lot, but I think it's, again, just really archetypally so typical of the inner child.
Mm.
So again, she was a woman who was very connected to her inner child when she was kind of telling jokes, right? It was there. It was very quirky, not maybe everybody's flavor of humor. But I was like, okay, this is what your inner child thinks is funny. So you have to allow yourself to be that, right? She wouldn't allow that at work. She didn't like her job again. Maybe I work with a lot of people who don't like their jobs. No, she didn't like her job. I was like, you need to let this out. So her inner child, through the meditation, asked her for orange tulips, right? And asked her for fluffy pens, and also asked her for um, Play-Doh or plasticine, depending on where you come from, and wanted to make plasticine unicorns. Now, we laughed about this because this was, to the adult self, completely ridiculous. Like, you're here hating your job and now you're making plasticine unicorns, right? Well, I tell you not, this woman is now an amazing ceramic artist. Her plasticine unicorns, after she made the first ones, her inner child says, I want to learn this. I want to know how to do this, right? So she decided to go and take some pottery classes,
Mm.
right? Now she's like, when you see her, that's all she'll talk about. Like, her inner child loves it so much. It's just her whole world. And the interesting thing is she comes from a place where actually that is part of her lineage.
Ah,
It's actually part of her lineage. So it's in the body, it's in the cellular
yeah,
memory. There's something
yeah.
telling you. So those are the two that come to mind because, I do believe that the inner child actually, when you connect to it, it's the closest connection to the source of yourself. You will get information through that your mind can't possibly come up with. It
Mm.
won't understand it, and it will be pertinent to your journey.
Yeah, and really, really what I get in that is the more that you connect with your inner child, the
Absolutely.
more fulfillment, the more
Mhm.
joy, the more happiness. Obviously you talked about what they had in their lives, but actually, for sure,
Mm.
that just everything else is going better. Like I'm sure that grumpy part has,
Right.
very much smaller, if not gone, because actually the life had changed. So yeah,
Yeah.
so thank you for sharing those inspirational stories. And actually, what can actually
Mm.
happen when we use this modality. And amazing that you've
Yeah.
shared that gift, because as you are listening to this now, you can do this meditation
Yeah.
to actually connect with your inner child. So, what a gift to do that
Mm.
and potentially change your own triangle and your
Yeah.
experiences of within that. So, thank you so much for this gorgeous conversation.
You're
Before
so
we finish,
welcome.
is there anything else that you would like to share?
Just that if you do the meditation, right, which I'm sure they're all going to do, then if something comes up that you don't understand, please get in touch with me and I'll help you to reframe it or to understand it, because sometimes things come up in a symbolic way. And people also get really worried if their inner child doesn't show up or shows up in an unwanted way. Like I've had some people say, oh, my inner child wouldn't talk to me. My inner child wasn't there. I could see other people, but there was nobody there, or it was just blank. It doesn't mean that your inner child doesn't want to talk to you. It just means that there's probably still a bit of your protection system saying, are you safe? Right? Your inner child sometimes just doesn't trust you. Often, most often, it's just been waiting for a very long time for you to actually come and meet him or her. But sometimes it's like, well, actually, I'm not sure that you're an adult I can trust, because the adults around me haven't been trustworthy. So that's what I would say to that.
Yeah,
Get in
absolutely.
touch.
Yeah, thank you very much for that invitation. I think it's really important as well because, yeah, with what might come up, um, and like you say, like you didn't use this word, but I can see it can be quite
Mm.
confronting as well, meeting
Yes.
versions of yourself. So get support in doing that work if you
Mm.
want to go deeper into it. So thank you so much, Gail, for this conversation. It's been really, really lovely. I really do value and appreciate it. And to the listeners, again, thank you for being here. I hope that you found this conversation as insightful as I have, and that, well, I'll see you on another video. But yeah, thank you for putting yourself here, putting yourself first, sharing your time and space. And if you haven't already, a reminder that my free gift to you is to join me on a 3-day live experience where I'm going to be sharing your freedom formula from anxiety and burnout. So I'd love for you to join me on that. So click the link. And last but not least, Gail, thank you so much. Really appreciated this conversation. So thank you for being here with us today.
You're so welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And I'll just say bye for now.